Can you imagine hearing this from your own daughter? Mom, I sold the grocery store. You didn't need it anymore. I did you a favor. That's how my story began. A betrayal from the one person I thought I could always trust, and what seemed like the end for me turned out to be the greatest turning point of my life. My name is Maggie. I'm a widow who spent her whole life working hard in our family grocery store, believing my greatest treasure was my daughter. I never imagined she would be the one to betray me in the most painful way. You won't believe what happened at the end of my story. So watch until the very last second, and then tell me in the comments, what would your reaction be if it happened to you? The grocery store was always more than just a business. It was the heart of our family. There, Robert and I lived through the best and worst days of our lives. I remember the very first time we opened the door. The floor still smelled of fresh paint. The shelves were almost empty, and I held little Emily's hand when our very first customer walked in. Robert smiled in that simple way of his and said, "Welcome. This will be your second home." And it truly was. At that counter, Emily did her first homework assignments while I weighed beans on the old scale. It was where she ate her first stolen candy, her face smeared with chocolate, where she learned to say good morning to every neighbor who came through the door. Every corner of that store held a memory. The back shelf still bore the pencil marks Robert used to measure her height, year after year. The freezer had a scratch that never went away, made one afternoon when Emily and her friends played hide and seek. That store wasn't just commerce, it was living memory. But as Emily grew, her gaze shifted. What I saw as an accomplishment, she began to see as a prison. I would hear her sigh whenever her friends bragged about parents who were executives or entrepreneurs. And when people asked what her father did, Emily would answer in a near whisper, "He owns a little shop," as if it were nothing. As if every school book, every uniform, every birthday gift hadn't been paid for behind that worn-out counter. The day she told me she wanted to sell the store, she didn't even ask for my opinion. She spoke as if she were talking about the weather. "Mom, this place is outdated. Nobody shops here anymore. Everyone goes to supermarkets now. I'd be doing you a favor." A favor. That word cut like a knife. I was the one who stayed up countless nights reorganizing stock, the one who counted coins to close the register, but still slipped extra candies to the neighbors' grandkids. Now my entire life's work was being reduced to something outdated, but I never imagined she'd actually go through with it. The sun hadn't even risen when I heard the doorbell. I opened the door, and there stood Emily, my daughter, with that rushed smile she always wears when she wants to justify something before even explaining it. In her hand, a crumpled envelope. On her face, the smug look of someone who thinks they've already won. "Mom, I have some news," she said, walking in without waiting. I sat at the table, my chest already tightening. I'd learned over the years that the worst news never arrives wrapped in flowers. Emily took a breath, looked at me with false sweetness, and dropped the words like stones into a lake. "I sold the grocery store, and the truck too." The words hit me like a slap. The store, our store, the place where I'd spent my life, where Robert, my husband, had greeted customers with a smile, where Emily herself had once played as a child behind the counter. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. "Mom, don't make that face," she continued, her voice dripping honey and poison. "You didn't need that place anymore. It was just dead weight. We turned it into something useful." Her words burned in my mind. The door chime, the smell of fresh bread, the shelves Robert polished with pride, they all rushed back to me. That store wasn't just bricks and wood, it was family, it was us. And with a single phrase, "You didn't need it anymore," she erased it all. Emily pulled out the contract, almost proud. A man named Richard Collins, an investor in town, had bought everything for a fair price. He planned to turn the store into a trendy coffee shop. My eyes scanned the clauses. I saw numbers, but none of it made sense. Because this wasn't about money, it was about identity. My daughter hadn't just sold a building, she'd sold the roots of our story. I looked at her, searching for even a flicker of the little girl who once ran between those shelves. I found none. Only a woman hardened by ambition, blind to the invisible value she was destroying. She smiled, satisfied, while I sat there, silent, my humiliation burning hot on my skin. It was as if she had ripped out my heart and sold it along with the shelves and counter. Emily pulled up a chair across from me and crossed her legs. "Look, Mom, the money will pay for our trip to Greece. It's an investment, you see. We deserve it. It's our dream. Deserve." She used that word like a crown, not a dagger. My own daughter, my blood, had erased me from my own life's story. I, who had stood behind that counter for decades, counting pennies to make ends meet, smiling at neighbors, offering credit to those who couldn't pay. I, who never traveled because I believed the store was the heart of our family. Now I was just the old lady who didn't need it anymore. My face flushed. My breath grew heavy. Anger throbbed at my temples, but I stayed quiet. Because I've learned that silence can cut deeper than a scream. Emily stared, waiting for me to explode. I didn't. She smiled, mistaking my silence for defeat. Inside me, a single thought echoed. How can a daughter treat her mother as an obstacle? I remembered Robert's words, my late husband's warning. The worst kind of betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from those who sit at your table. Now I understood. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I would no longer be the passive woman who swallowed humiliation. I carried not just anger, but the seed of reckoning. Not blind revenge. Justice. They thought they had turned the page, but they forgot one thing. I know the story from the very beginning. I looked at Emily and simply said, "All right, sweetheart. If you think you've done the right thing, we'll see." She smiled, believing the matter was closed. But for me, that was just the beginning, the turning point, the twist she would never see coming. Emily rose from the table with the air of someone who had just won a battle. She tossed the envelope of papers onto the wooden surface and said, before walking out, "Oh, and don't worry about a thing, Mom. We took care of everything. Just enjoy your house. Rest. You've already done enough." Then she left. The door slammed shut with a sharp crack that echoed inside me. The kitchen clock read 10:02. Sunlight streamed through the window, turning the cups, the teapot, the memories golden, but everything looked gray. I glanced around the room. Every object in that house breathed the story of the grocery store. The wooden crates that once held apples, the dish towel embroidered with the logo Robert had made, even the old scale in the corner, still whispering of days spent weighing beans. Now, all of it had been sold, discarded, erased. What cut the deepest wasn't just the sale. It was the audacity, the boldness of excluding me. My own daughter had treated me like a burden, not the guardian of something that existed long before she was born. Injustice, betrayal, humiliation. The words pounded inside me like hammers, and with them came a flame, fury, anger. Do you know what's most cruel? It's not losing something material. It's losing respect. Emily hadn't just stolen walls and shelves. She tried to steal my dignity. But she didn't know dignity can't be signed away at a notary's office. I climbed the stairs slowly. Each creak beneath my tired feet seemed to echo my rage. I entered the bedroom where Robert and I had slept for more than 40 years. Everything still carried his scent, even after all these years. I opened the nightstand drawer, and there it was, a brown envelope, my name written in his steady hand, for Margaret. When the time comes, my mind drifted back to the night he gave it to me. We were on the porch, under a sky full of stars. Robert held my hands and said, "One day, Maggie, you might feel like everything has been taken from you. When that day comes, open this envelope. Inside, I've left not just papers but our future." At the time, I didn't understand. Now, I did. I held the envelope in my trembling hands. It felt heavy, as if filled with stones, or truths. I didn't open it, not yet. There was something inside me that wanted to savor this moment. The moment I realized Emily's betrayal would not be the end of my story. I returned to the living room, sat in the armchair, and laid the envelope across my lap. I looked at the clock, at the sunlight pouring in, at the closed door, and I thought, they believe they've defeated me, that they've reduced me to silence, but they forgot silence can be the sharpest weapon, and inside that envelope might lie not only the key to my reckoning, but to justice itself. For the first time that day, I drew a deep breath and smiled to myself. A small smile, but unshakable, because I knew the humiliation I had suffered would turn into catharsis. Not born of hatred, but of hope, of reflection, of transformation. I ran my fingers over Robert's handwriting and whispered, "My love, I think it's finally time to open what you left for me, and when I do, nothing will ever be the same." The envelope rested on my lap as if it were alive. I stared at it for long minutes, my heart pounding like a drum inside my chest. It felt as though Robert were still there, sitting across from me, waiting for me to gather the courage to face what he had left behind. I ran my fingers over his handwriting. Firm, clean, so different from mine, always rushed. It was like touching his skin, years after our goodbye. For a moment, I hesitated. What if it was nothing but bills inside? What if it was empty? Maybe I was just clinging to an illusion. But then I remembered the way he held my hands that night. The serious, steady look in his eyes. Robert was never a man who made promises lightly. I took a deep breath and broke the seal. Inside was a neat plastic folder, organized with precision. Documents, contracts, deeds. And on top, a handwritten note. Maggie, if you're reading this, it means the time has come for you to take the helm. I never wanted to burden you with numbers or papers, but I thought of everything for your future. Trust it, and never let anyone make you feel small. Robert, tears fell before I could stop them. It was like hearing his voice again, like feeling his hand resting over mine. And in that moment, the sting of Emily's betrayal began to mix with something new, hope. I opened the folder, and what I saw left me breathless. Deeds, 2 properties. A commercial building downtown. 2 warehouses leased to local businesses. A vast plot of land on the city's outskirts, and more. Shares of companies I'd only ever heard mentioned on the evening news. Investments I had never suspected. My husband, the same man who drove a bus for 40 years, had quietly built a fortune, and never told me. My hands trembled. I felt torn between shock and gratitude. How could he have hidden this from me? And yet, how could I not thank him for protecting me in silence? As I flipped through the pages, I noticed a pattern. Every asset was tied to one name, Turner Holdings, LLC, and in every document I was listed as the sole heir. My heart raced. If the grocery store was tied to the holding, Emily's sale meant nothing. It wasn't hers. It never had been. It was mine. All of it was mine. The sting of betrayal I'd felt that morning began to change into something stronger, not just anger, but justice. I closed the folder, pressed it to my chest, and whispered, Robert, you knew. You knew one day I'd need this. A shiver ran down my spine. It was as if he had foreseen the morning Emily would show up to take everything from me, and had left this envelope as my hidden weapon. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the yard. The trees swayed in the wind, and for a fleeting moment, I felt Robert was there, in the whisper of the leaves. For the first time in a long while, I smiled. Not a smile of joy. Not yet. But a smile of someone who knows the tide has turned, even if no one else realizes it. The rest of the afternoon, I sat with the folder open before me. Each document revealed another secret. Numbers I had never seen in my life. Figures I never imagined would belong to me. It was like discovering that the man I shared bread and sweat with for 40 years had also been a silent strategist, an architect of my future. And alongside my awe, something else grew. Not toward Robert, toward Emily. My daughter had treated me as disposable, dismissed me as dead weight, without knowing I was the one who owned everything. She thought she had humiliated me, but soon she would taste humiliation herself. At the bottom of the folder was a business card. Samuel Green, ESQ Roberts. Handwriting across it read in bold letters, Trust Samuel. He knows. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone, but I dialed. Law offices of Samuel Green. Good morning, a woman answered. This is Margaret Turner, I said. Silence. Then, a sharp inhale on the other end. Mrs. Turner. Mr. Green asked that if you ever called, you'd be put through immediately. My heart thundered. Robert had planned for this moment, down to the last detail. Moments later, I heard his calm, deep voice. Margaret, I've been waiting for your call. I closed my eyes. It felt like my life had just turned a page. I told him about Emily, about the sale, about the humiliation of being erased. On the other end, he sighed, not with surprise, but with certainty. I'm sorry you went through this, Margaret, but I have to tell you, the sale your daughter made isn't valid. My breath caught. What do you mean? The store isn't in her name. It isn't even in yours directly. It's under Turner Holdings, and you are the sole heir. Any contract signed by anyone else is null. For a second, I couldn't speak. It was like hearing the sound of chains falling away. Emily thought she had stolen my heart, but she hadn't taken a single brick. I smiled to myself, a small smile but sharp as a blade. Samuel continued, you have 2 options. You can take legal action against her right now, or you can reclaim everything quietly. I breathed deep, and in that moment, the decision formed inside me. No scandals, Samuel. I want justice. I want her to learn. I want life to hand her the same surprise she handed me. A pause, then his steady voice. Then, we'll do it your way. Quiet, but precise. I pressed the folder to my chest. It was as if Robert were smiling from somewhere unseen, proud. Emily had underestimated me, but now, I held the key to the turning point. The twist, the reckoning she would never see coming. I spent the whole night without sleep. The envelope still lay open on the table, the folder neatly organized by my side. Every so often I would rise, walk to the window, return to the armchair, and open the documents again. It was as if I couldn't trust my own eyes. For 40 years I watched Robert wake early, put on his uniform, and drive buses through the city streets. He came home smelling of diesel, his eyes weary, yet always with a smile as he greeted me at the door. I thought that simple paycheck was all we had. But now, spread before me, were papers that told another story. Robert hadn't lived a double life of betrayal. He had lived one of silent strategy. He hadn't just been a bus driver. He had been an architect of the future. The deeds were stacked high. My eyes stung from rereading the numbers. I pressed a hand to my mouth and let out a sob, not of joy, of shock. And with the shock came a bitter taste. How could Robert have hidden this from me? Not out of distrust, I knew better, out of caution. He had known our daughter. He had known that if Emily ever discovered this too soon, her greed would take over, and he had been right. The proof was in front of me. She sold the grocery store without hesitation. If she had known about the fortune, she would have sold me along with it. I felt Torningar at the hidden truth, hope for the future it promised, and the first flicker of vengeance against the daughter who had humiliated me. I picked up Robert's photo from the shelf. He was in uniform, standing proudly beside his bus. I stared into his eyes. "You knew, didn't you?" I whispered. "You knew one day I'd need this strength." The tears came again, but this time they were different. They weren't from pain. They were release. I turned the pages, running my fingers across the lines. It was so much, and yet, it was all still under my name. The injustice of yesterday morning began to dissolve, not because Emily had been right, but because now I knew the truth. She hadn't taken anything from me. She never had the power. Her so-called victory was nothing but an illusion. And soon, very soon she would face the shock of discovering it. I glanced at the clock. 4 a.m. The city slept. But inside me, something had awakened. A voice, calm and steady, whispered, "Maggie, you are not a victim. You are the heir. You are the guardian. You are stronger than they ever imagined." For the first time since Emily had slammed my door, I felt not just anger, but power. I studied the contracts again. Before, I had read them with disbelief. Now, I read them with purpose. Robert hadn't just gathered properties and stocks. He had built a shield. Turner Holdings wasn't just a company. It was a fortress, and my name was written on every page. While Emily thought she had stripped me of dignity, I was discovering that I was far stronger than she could ever comprehend. The emotions inside me shifted, rage turning into resolve, humiliation giving way to justice. Not vengeance for vengeance's sake, balance, correction, a lesson she would never forget. I picked up Samuel Green's business card, traced my finger over the embossed letters. It felt like holding a key to a vault not just of wealth, but of power. I closed my eyes and saw Emily again, hours earlier, with that venomous smile, her belief that I had been reduced to nothing, and me, now knowing I was about to summon a silent storm. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to rush. What I needed was time. Time for her illusion to grow so that, when it crumbled, the fall would be unforgettable. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. And justice delivered late cuts the deepest. As dawn broke, I whispered to Robert's photo, "Thank you, my love. You gave me the map. Now it's my turn to follow the path." And for the first time since the betrayal, I fell asleep in peace. Samuel's office was in the heart of downtown, inside an old red brick building. I pushed open the glass door, my palms sweating. Robert's folder clutched tightly to my chest. The gold lettering at the reception desk read, "Green and Associates, Law Offices." The secretary greeted me with a kind smile. "Mrs. Turner." I nodded. "Mr. Green is expecting you. Please, go in." I walked down the narrow hallway to a half-open door. On the other side sat a man with gray hair, thin-rimmed glasses, and eyes that were calm but piercing. It felt as if he already knew me. "Margaret Turner," he said, standing and extending his hand. "At last, we meet." I shook his hand, feeling the firmness of his grip, the firmness of someone who carried secrets. I sat down as he opened his leather folder. Robert spoke of you often. He told me that one day I would have the honor of helping you. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. He planned even this. Samuel nodded. Robert was a quiet man, but meticulous. He foresaw that someone might try to take from you what is rightfully yours, and he prepared for it. I slid the documents across the desk. He leafed through them slowly, like pages he already knew by heart. Exactly as I thought, he said. Turner Holdings is intact. Every asset is registered under the company. And you, Mrs. Turner, are the sole heir and controller. My heart raced. Then, the sale of the grocery store. He removed his glasses, set them on the desk, and looked directly at me. It holds no weight. It was invalid from the start. A shock ran through me. Everything Emily had said that it was hers, that she had the right, that she was doing me a favor, collapsed in an instant. The contract she signed was nothing but useless paper. So this means, I asked, my voice trembling, I can take everything back. Samuel's lips curved into a faint smile. Not only can you have every right to. The anger I had carried since the betrayal began to transform into something else, not raw pain anymore, but the sweet weight of justice approaching. I placed my hands on the desk and drew a deep breath. I don't just want to yell at her. I don't want to throw this in her face. I want her to learn. I want her to feel the weight of what she did. Samuel held my gaze for a long moment. Then he said, "Then we'll do it your way. Quiet, but precise." He explained the next steps. He would file a notice to void the sale, discreetly, without drawing attention. Richard Collins, the buyer, wouldn't lose a cent. He would be reimbursed directly by the holding. But Emily would be left with nothing. When she comes back from her trip, she realizes she owns nothing, Samuel said. And more than that, you remain the rightful owner. For the first time in days, I smiled. Not a smile of vengeance, but of release. The wound Emily had carved wouldn't heal quickly, but now I had armor. I looked at Samuel and asked, did Robert really know that our own daughter could do something like this? Samuel sighed. He never underestimated anyone. He knew the human heart, and he wanted to make sure that, if the day came, you would be ready to defend yourself. I lowered my eyes to the papers spread across the desk. Robert hadn't just left me wealth. He had left me the chance to rebuild myself. And at that moment, I decided I would use that chance, not to destroy my daughter, but to rebuild the respect she tried to strip from me. When I walked out of the office, the afternoon sun lit the streets. People hurried past. Cars honked. Life carried on. But inside me, everything had changed. I was no longer the humiliated woman standing outside the grocery store. I was Margaret Turner, keeper of a legacy, owner of my own destiny. And as I walked home, one thought echoed louder than all the rest. They think they erased me. But this is where the real story begins. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, Robert's folder on one side and Samuel's notes on the other. The pages were covered in scribbles, arrows, circled numbers. I had never been the kind of woman to deal with contracts, yet here I was deciphering what felt like a treasure map. But it wasn't gold I was after. It was justice. Samuel had explained every step of how we could annul the sale of the grocery store quietly, without scandal. The contract Emily had signed held no value. She had never been the legal owner. Richard Collins, the buyer, would be reimbursed directly by the holding company. And in the end, the grocery store would return to me, simple, on paper. But in truth, it was far more than that. It was the heart of my family being placed back in my hands. Still, Samuel had asked me the question that lingered long after I hung up the phone. You have every right to expose your daughter, Mrs. Turner, but do you want to punish her or teach her? That question echoed inside me. On one side, Rag Emily's cold words replaying in my head. You don't need that anymore, Mom. I did you a favor. On the other, the memory of her as a child running between the shelves, her laughter sweet, her face smeared with stolen chocolate. Between anger and love, there was a vast abyss, and I had to choose which side to build my bridge. I picked up Robert's photo once more. His eyes stared back with the same calm I had always known, and I remembered his words. Justice doesn't need to be loud, Maggie. It just needs to be firm. That's when I understood. I didn't want revenge. I wanted poetic justice. I didn't want to destroy Emily. I wanted her to see for herself just how much she had destroyed. Over the phone, Samuel and I went through every detail, filing the silent action to reclaim the grocery store, securing every property document against new fraud attempts, mapping out my son-in-law Mark's debts, to see just how far he had tried to use me without my knowledge. With each step, I felt my spine straighten. I was no longer the humiliated woman. I was the woman making plans. That night would be remembered as the moment I stopped being a victim and became a guardian, not just of Robert's money, but of his legacy. I closed the folder, drew in a steady breath, and whispered, "Emily thinks she's won, but the real turning point is only beginning." 2 days later, I returned to Samuel's office. The folder no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a shield. "I've already filed the annulment," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Collins will be notified discreetly. He won't lose a dime, but the store will be yours again." My heart pounded. It was official. The place Emily tried to tear away from me was coming back. Samuel slid a copy of the notice across the desk. Collins would get full reimbursement, plus compensation. He had no reason to fight. The fault was never his. It was Emily's. And ironically, she didn't even know. While she enjoyed her trip to Greece, thinking she had closed the perfect deal, she had no idea that when she returned, she would find nothing but dust in her hands. The thought gave me a taste of poetic revenge, not because I wanted her to suffer, but because life itself was about to deliver the lesson she had denied me. Samuel then placed another folder on the desk. Inside were records of Mark's debts, credit cards maxed out, loans piling high, even an attempt to mortgage my own house. My blood ran cold. If he had succeeded, I could have lost everything. Emily had betrayed me out of ambition. Mark had tried to rob me out of desperation. And together, they believed I was nothing more than a frail old woman, powerless to resist. But they were wrong. Samuel leaned back in his chair. "Do you want me to file against Emily too?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I want her to feel the absence of what she thought she had. I want her to discover, on her own, that she never had any power." His brow arched. "So you want silence?" I smiled faintly. "Silence, Samuel. Silence screams louder than any scandal." When I stepped outside, the city was bathed in evening light. Street lamps flickered on, the smell of fresh bread drifted from the bakeries, and for a fleeting moment, I felt young again, standing beside Robert, dreaming of the future. But the future had already arrived, and in it, there was no room for unpunished betrayal. As I walked home, my phone buzzed. A message from an international number. It was Emily. "Mom, we're having the time of our lives. Greece is beautiful. I can't wait to show you the pictures." I stopped in the middle of the street, staring at the glowing screen, and I smiled to myself. Because I knew when she came back, the scenery would look very different. Samuel had warned me. Mark isn't just a man in debt. Margaret, he's dangerous in the quietest sense of the word. He lives on appearances and doesn't care about consequences. That night, I sat at the table with Robert's folder on one side and Mark's dossier on the other. Page after page of statements, loan records, collection notices. It was like opening the drawer of a double life. I had always thought Mark was too polished. His suits always pressed, his car gleaming, his words rehearsed. He spoke about business as if he were a great investor, yet I had never seen a single real result. Emily admired him. "He thinks big, Mom," she'd say, but all I saw was a man chasing dreams without roots. And now, with the evidence before me, I was certain. Mark was a facade, a house of cards held up by debt, maxed out credit cards, high-interest personal loans, even online betting, slips, thousands of dollars wasted on false promises of quick returns. My stomach twisted with every page. This wasn't just irresponsibility, it was obsession, a sickness for status. And the worst part, he had tried to use my home as collateral for a loan worth over $100,000. Samuel had blocked it in time, thanks to the holding structure. But without that shield, I would have lost not just the store, but the very roof over my head. Rage burned through me. Life has a way of disguising monsters in suits. At Sunday lunches, I saw a charming man, pouring wine like a king. Behind that smile was nothing but desperation, gambling his way into ruin. Emily, blinded by vanity, couldn't see it, or maybe she refused to. Perhaps the shine of his promises blinded her to the shadow of truth. But now, I saw. And once you see, there is no turning back. I slammed the dossier shut. Mark wasn't just a son-in-law. He was a predator who had already tried to destroy me. And when Emily returned from Greece, she wouldn't just find a disappointed mother. She would face a woman ready to prove that betrayals, big or small, always come with consequences. Because life, sooner or later, demands balance. And I would be the instrument of that justice. The next morning, Samuel called me. His voice was steady, but edged with caution. "Margaret, I thought you should know there's more about Mark than we realized." My chest tightened. "More?" "Yes, he didn't just try to use your home as collateral. I discovered he signed business contracts with local investors, using the name Turner Holdings." A chill ran through me. "But he has no rights over the holding." "Exactly," Samuel said. "Which means all of those contracts are fraudulent. But still, it shows how far he's willing to go." I felt sick. Mark wasn't just drowning in debt. He was willing to drag everyone else under with him. The dossier revealed even darker truths. Sports betting accounts, deposits into online casinos, withdrawals, losses, mounting debt. The man Emily called a visionary was nothing but a desperate gambler, a man who saw life as a roulette wheel, and me as a poker chip. Anger pulsed at my temples. Samuel hesitated before adding, "There's something else. We found records of an apartment in another city. It's not under his name, but the rent is paid from Mark's account." Silence. I didn't need to hear more. I already knew what it meant. Emily believed she was living a fairy tale. But in truth, she was standing on quicksand. A marriage built on debt, lies, and maybe betrayal. I thought of her in Greece, smiling for photos, believing she was at the height of happiness. She had no idea of the storm forming behind her. When she returned, she wouldn't just find the grocery store out of her reach. She would also face a husband bankrupt, maybe even gone. And perhaps then, she would finally learn the value of what she had thrown away. I closed the dossier, stared out the window, and whispered to myself, "They think they fooled me, but the ones about to be surprised are them." My phone buzzed on the table. A short message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Turner, do you really know who your daughter is married to?" My heart froze. The masks were falling faster than I ever imagined. The sky was gray when I heard a car pull up in front of my house. Through the window, I saw Emily dragging a suitcase. Her face tired, her eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. Gone was the triumphant smile she had worn weeks earlier when she left for Greece. What I saw now was only exhaustion and, maybe, shame. She climbed the steps slowly, as if carrying more than just physical weight. She knocked twice, hesitated, then called out softly, "Mom, it's me." I opened the door in silence. Emily stepped in, dropped her suitcase on the floor, and exhaled. "Can we talk?" We sat at the table. She removed her sunglasses, and that's when I saw her eyes were red, mascara smudged, makeup poorly retouched. This was not the proud daughter who had once told me, "I did you a favor, Mom." This was a broken woman. "Mark left me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He stayed in Athens, stopped answering my calls. He's gone." My heart tightened, but I didn't let compassion rush in. "He left?" I asked. She nodded, tears spilling. "And he left debts. So many debts. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know." I sighed deeply. The truth I already knew, thanks to Samuel, was now crashing down on her like an avalanche. For the first time, I saw my daughter taste the same humiliation she had once made me endure. "I thought," she sobbed, "I thought we were living a dream. I thought it would all work out." But when we went back to the hotel, the cards didn't go through. The staff looked at us like criminals. She buried her face in her hands. "Mom, I've never felt so humiliated in my life." Her words echoed inside me. The same humiliation I had felt when she sold the store behind my back. The same sense of being erased, diminished, discarded. For a moment, I wanted to hold her. But I stayed still, because part of me knew she needed to feel the weight of her own choices. "I have nowhere else to go," she said finally. "Can I stay here for a while? Just until I figure things out?" I looked at the suitcase on the floor when she had left, full of arrogance. That suitcase carried expensive clothes, perfume, grand plans. Now, it looked like nothing more than a burden. "You can stay," I said at last, "but things won't be the same as before." She looked at me, startled. Maybe she expected me to welcome her with open arms, without conditions, but I was no longer the submissive mother. I was the guardian now, and the guardian had to teach. That night, we ate dinner together. Plain rice, roasted chicken, a simple salad. Emily looked at her plate and murmured, "It's been so long since I've had real food." The words, simple as they were, hit me hard. She had traded the value of the essential for the glitter of the superficial, and here, at my table, she was rediscovering what truly mattered. After dinner, I told her, "You can stay. This is your home too. But understand, I will not carry your mistakes anymore." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if you live here, you'll work, you'll pay your own bills. You'll learn to stand on your own feet." She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. Her silence told me everything. She was too fragile to argue. "All right," she whispered. And for the first time, my daughter accepted a condition without resistance. Later that night, I passed her room. The door was ajar. I saw Emily sitting on the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands. She was crying quietly, unaware that I was watching. Part of me longed to go in, to comfort her. But another part knew this pain was necessary. It was the beginning of the catharsis that would change her. Back in my room, I looked at Robert's photo on the nightstand. "She's broken," I whispered, "but maybe that's how she learned." And I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, a fragile mix of sorrow and hope, because as much as my heart ached as a mother, I knew this was the only path to saving not just my daughter, but our family's story. The next morning, when I woke up, I found Emily in the kitchen. She was wearing an apron, washing dishes. A small gesture, almost nothing, but coming from her, it was monumental. She turned, gave me a timid smile, and said, "Mom, will you help me find a job?" And in that instant I knew the transformation had begun. The next morning, Emily woke up early. Still in her pajamas, she was scrolling through job ads on her phone. With every listing she read, she frowned, as if each word weighed her down. "There's nothing at my level," she muttered. I smiled faintly. "At your level, Emily, doesn't exist anymore. Now it's at the level of reality." She gave me a displeased look, but stayed quiet. Little by little, she was beginning to understand I wasn't trying to humiliate her. I was reminding her of the truth. 2 days later, she found something. Cleaning rooms at a small roadside motel. It paid little, far less than what she was used to, but it paid. When she came home with the news, she seemed embarrassed. "Mom, it's just temporary. Until I get back on my feet." "Every beginning feels temporary, Emily. But if it's done with dignity, it becomes a foundation," I replied. She sighed but didn't argue. And for me, that alone was a victory. On her first day, I walked her to the door. She wore plain clothes borrowed from me. Hers were too fine for scrubbing floors. She carried a bucket and a rag. Her once perfectly made-up face now showed dark circles under her eyes. That evening, when she returned, her hands were red, her hair messy, her expression weary. She sat at the table in silence. "How was it?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "Humiliating." The word struck me like an arrow. It was the same word I had felt when she sold the grocery store. Now, for the first time, she was tasting it herself. As she ate quietly, I thought, life always finds a way to return what we give. This wasn't my revenge. It was balance. It was justice, unfolding in silence. Robert used to say, "The hardest lessons don't come from someone's mouth, they come from your own falls." And here, before me, my daughter was living hers. At the end of dinner, Emily looked up. "Thank you for letting me stay here, Mom." It was the first time in years I had heard true gratitude in her voice. I smiled gently. "You'll stand again, Emily, but this time, you'll know what it means to truly be on your feet." She lowered her head, holding back tears, and in silence, I thanked Robert. Somewhere, I knew, he was smiling, watching his daughter finally begin to learn. By the second week, Emily came home with slumped shoulders. Her hands were rough from cleaning chemicals. A bleach stain spread across her blouse. She left her shoes at the door not because I asked, but because she understood now that it was right. She sat at the table, staring into nothing. "People don't look at me, Mom," she said hoarsely. "They look through me. As if I were part of the wall." The words cut deep because that was exactly how I felt when she erased me from the grocery store. Now, she was learning the bitter taste of invisibility. One night, she came home with red eyes. "A guest made me clean the room 3 times, said I didn't know what I was doing," she whispered, "and I cleaned." I didn't argue. I looked at her, stunned. Emily, who had always raised her voice, who had always demanded her way, was now silent before a stranger. It was painful to see her endure it. but it was the only way for her to learn what she had refused to hear from me. Week after week, her pride crumbled. And then, one evening in the third week, she placed a $20 bill on the table. "It was my tip today," she said. She slid it toward me. "I want to contribute, Mom, for dinner, for the lights, for the water." My chest swelled, not because of the money, but because of the gesture. For the first time, Emily understood the meaning of giving, not just taking. That night, I heard noises in the kitchen. I got up quietly and found her wearing an apron, washing dishes without being asked. She hummed softly, lost in thought, while soap bubbles covered her hands. I stood at the doorway, silently watching, and I realized my daughter was changing. Her fall was turning into growth, her humiliation into reflection. When she noticed me, she turned off the faucet, dried her hands, and asked, "Mom, I know I've made mistakes, but do you still believe I can change?" I looked her in the eyes. I smiled, but I didn't answer, because I wanted life itself, not just my words, to give her that answer. The days went by, and every gesture from Emily felt different. She was no longer the daughter who stormed through doors in high heels, demanding to be served. Now, she came home with the smell of disinfectant on her hands, tired, but more human. One evening, after dinner, she sat across from me with a serious look. "Mom," she began, her voice hesitant, "I know I ruined everything. I know I disrespected you, but I feel like I'm finally learning what I never wanted to hear." I stayed silent, simply watching her. She went on, "I thought money and status were everything. I thought the store was too small, that the past was a burden. But today, I miss it. I miss that little bell on the door, the smell of fresh bread, the warmth of people coming in." My heart tightened. Emily was speaking of the grocery store as if it were a lost home. And in that moment I knew it was time to open Robert's secret. That night, I went to my room and pulled out the wooden box where I had kept his folder. I ran my hand across the lid, remembering the first time I opened it, the shock, the tears, the hope. Back in the living room, I set the folder on the table in front of her. Her eyes widened. "What's this?" "The truth," I answered. "Something your father left me, and something I kept until I thought you were ready." She reached for it, but I held it firmly. "Before you open it, understand this. It's not a prize. It's not a gift. It's responsibility." I opened the folder slowly and handed her Robert's note. She read in silence. "Maggie, if you're reading this, it means the time has come for you to take the helm. I thought of everything for your future. Trust it, and never let anyone make you feel small." Tears rolled down her face. He wrote this." I nodded. "And not just words." I showed her the documents, deeds, stocks, bank records. With every page, her eyes grew wider. "Dad was a bus driver. How could he?" she stammered. "He was more than a driver," I said with pride. "He was a quiet, wise man. While he drove buses, he invested, he saved, he built, and he put everything, absolutely everything, in the family's name." Emily pressed her hands to her mouth, unable to speak. The truth shattered every certainty she had carried. I watched her quietly. Part of me wanted to say, "See, Emily, you humiliated me without knowing I was the guardian of all this." But I didn't, because this wasn't about revenge, it was about learning. The documents themselves weren't the real lesson. The shock of seeing them, that was. She flipped through the papers with trembling hands, her breath quickening with every deed and contract. When she finished, she leaned back, overwhelmed. "All my life, I thought we were poor," she whispered. "And in some ways, we were," I replied. "Poor in luxury, but rich in values. Your father never wanted money to be our identity." Her head dropped. "And I treated you like nothing. I sold the store as if it were trash. I disrespected everything he built." Tears burned my eyes, but I spoke firmly. "That's why I never told you. Robert knew who you were. He knew if you learned too soon, you'd lose yourself. He wanted you to grow first. To learn that real wealth isn't in the pocket, it's in character." She wept silently. "I had to lose everything to understand this." "Yes," I said. "Life teaches through pain when we reject the lesson through reason." She clutched the papers to her chest. "Mom, I don't deserve any of this." "It's not about deserving," I corrected. "It's about using it well, and never forgetting that dignity is worth more than any fortune." Emily wiped her tears and looked at me with new eyes. "I promise, Mom. I promise I'll change." I'll honor what Dad built. I'll never treat you that way again. There was something new in her gaze. Not pride, humility, true reflection. I squeezed her hands tightly. I don't want pretty promises. I want action. She nodded. And in that moment, I felt for the first time that Emily was speaking from her heart, not her vanity. The silence that filled the room was different now, not the silence of resentment, but of catharsis. Two hearts, finally finding their way back to each other through pain. I looked at Robert's portrait on the wall and thought, we did it, my love. She finally understands. Emily closed the folder carefully and asked, what now, Mom? What do we do with all this? I smiled softly. Now, we give the store back what it always was, not just a business, but a place of life. Emily frowned, curious, but didn't push. Because she knew from that moment on, she wasn't just a spectator anymore. She was part of the plan. The next morning after the revelation, I invited Emily to walk with me to the old grocery store. The air was crisp, the streets still quiet. As we walked, I noticed something different in her. She no longer moved like someone demanding attention. She walked like someone observing, someone learning. When we reached the corner of Main Street, my heart tightened. There it was, the sign, Collins Cafe coming soon. The windows were covered with brown paper, hiding the renovations inside. Emily stopped at the door and sighed deeply. This is where I grew up, she said, her voice trembling. And this is where you tried to erase me, I added, without softening the truth. She lowered her eyes, but she didn't argue. The shame was visibly, and for the first time, it didn't wound me, it gave me hope. That same day, Samuel arranged a meeting with Richard Collins, the buyer. He welcomed us in his office, a middle-aged man, elegant but cordial. Mrs. Turner, I understand there was a misunderstanding, he said after listening to Samuel. I've already been informed the sale was invalid. I don't want trouble. I'll return the store without question, as long as I'm reimbursed. I nodded. I'm not here to hurt you, Mr. Collins. I only want what is rightfully mine. He smiled faintly. Then we're in agreement. And with a few signatures, the store was legally mine again. Emily watched in silence, as if witnessing a miracle, but I knew it wasn't a miracle. It was justice. As we left the office, emotions swept through me. Having the grocery store back didn't erase the betrayal, but it restored something far greater, my dignity, and that had no price. Emily took my arm. Mom, I don't deserve to be here, but thank you for letting me come. I looked at her and said, it's not about deserving, Emily. It's about learning. She breathed deeply and nodded. This time, there was no pride in her voice, only gratitude. Days later, we received the keys. When I opened the store again, the bell rang, a sound that flooded me with memories. The air was dusty, the shelves bare, but in front of me I didn't see what it was. I saw what it could be again. Emily ran her hand along the back wall. The height marks, they're still here. My heart warmed. Maybe it was a sign. Nothing was ever truly lost. She touched the dusty counter. I remember. Dad always let me play cashier up here. I smiled, tears burning my eyes. It was as if Robert was there with us unseen, proud. The space was empty, but every corner echoed with the past. The shelves could be filled again. The bell could ring again. But more than that, I wanted it to have a greater purpose. As we walked through the aisles, Emily said, what if we reopened it, Mom? Not like before, but in a new way. I stopped and looked at her. Knew how. She drew in a breath. We could make it a place that helps people, a place where families can find affordable food, support, even a community space. Her words surprised me. This was the same daughter who once dismissed every brick of this place, and now she spoke of it as a source of hope. My chest filled with release. Robert would have smiled if he could hear her. All right, I said firmly. But it won't just be a store. I looked around, imagining life filling the walls again. It will be a symbol. What your arrogance tried to destroy will now rise against to lift others. Emily nodded, her eyes shining. We could call it the Community Food Hub, a place of support. I smiled. Whatever the name, it will be a legacy. In that moment, I understood something profound. The store had always been a part of us, but now, it would belong to others too. It would be the place where our pain turned into hope, where our story of betrayal and humiliation became one of justice and renewal. Robert hadn't just built a fortune. He had left us the tools to turn our downfall into growth, and our growth into service. As we stepped outside, Emily looked at the storefront, tears in her eyes. Mom, I swear, I'll honor this. I'll dedicate my life to making sure this place is never again a source of shame, but of pride. I took her hand. Then let's begin. The future of this store won't be about goods. It will be about people. And deep in my heart, I felt it. The real turning point was only just beginning. The weeks that followed were filled with dust, paint, and hammers. The old grocery store, once a tomb of my memories, now echoed with the sounds of rebuilding. Every wall painted, every shelf restored, felt like a piece of our story being mended. Emily worked beside me. No high heels, no expensive dresses. Just jeans, a simple t-shirt, and her hair tied back in a ponytail. I saw in her a woman I never thought I would know, humble, dedicated, patient. When the neighbors heard the store was coming back, they started showing up. Mrs. Helen brought buckets of paint. Mr. Morris helped fix the wiring. Even young people from the neighborhood came to volunteer, laughing as they carried boxes. Emily watched, astonished. They want to help, without asking for anything in return. I smiled, because this was never just a store. It was part of their lives, and it still can be. That's when I realized the community was just as hungry for dignity as we were. The store was simply the perfect excuse to reignite that bond. One quiet evening, we sat at the dusty counter. "What should we call it?" Emily asked. "The name doesn't matter," I replied. "What matters is the purpose." She pressed on. "The purpose is clear. It won't just sell food. It will give people dignity, a place of support." I nodded, moved. "Then it will be a place where no one feels small, where no one tastes the humiliation I once felt." Emily squeezed my hand, and that I felt too. In that handshake, I realized we were rebuilding not only walls but our relationship. Every brushstroke was more than paint. It was hope. Every brick repaired was more than construction. It was reflection. Every neighbor's smile was more than support. It was proof that behind pain, life still thrived. And Robert, somewhere, was smiling, because his legacy was never just financial. It was human. On opening day, I woke before dawn. I put on my simple cotton dress, the one I saved for special Sundays, and tied my hair back with a blue scarf. Emily came downstairs soon after, wearing a white apron already stained with paint and flour. She gave me a timid smile. "Ready, Mom?" I nodded, though my heart was racing. When we opened the door, the bell rang. The same sound that had so often made me smile in the past, but now, it rang like rebirth. The community poured in. Children running, neighbors hugging, even strangers who had heard about the reopening. The shelves were stocked with fresh food, but there was more. A donation table, a job board, and even a small space for community gatherings. Emily stood behind the counter, pouring coffee for the first visitors. I saw pride in her eyes, but not the hollow pride of before. It was humble pride, the pride of someone who finally understood the value of work. A neighbor asked me to say a few words. I stepped onto the counter's small platform and took a deep breath. This store has always been more than bricks and shelves. It was the heart of our family, and now it will also be the heart of this community. Here, no one will be seen as worthless. No one will be invisible. Here, everyone belongs. Applause filled the space. Emily wiped away tears. Later, as people began to leave, Emily came to me. She held my hands in front of everyone and said, her voice firm, "Mom, I disrespected you. I humiliated you. I betrayed you, but you gave me the chance to start over. Today, I promise I will honor you, Dad, and everything this place stands for." People around us listened. Some even cried. I embraced her, letting fall the tears I had held back for so long. "I forgive you, Emily, and I love you." As the afternoon sun poured through the renewed windows, I knew our journey had reached its climax. From injustice to revolt, from humiliation to catharsis, we had arrived at something greater, hope. Robert was there, in spirit, and I knew he would approve. That night, when I closed the new store, I heard the bell ring softly as if it were both farewell and blessing. I smiled, watching Emily carry a box of food to donate. "Mom," she said, her eyes shining, "I think we finally found our purpose." And in that moment, I knew the legacy was safe, not just within these walls, but within her heart. Months passed after the reopening. The old grocery store was no longer just a place of business. It had become a meeting point, a place of belonging. Mornings began with the smell of fresh coffee, neighbors laughing, children running between the tables, and at the center of it all was Emily. She arrived early, stocked the shelves, greeted every person with a genuine smile. I often watched her from a distance, pretending to be busy so she wouldn't see the pride in my eyes. Not blind pride, but the pride of a mother finally watching her daughter walk with dignity. One day, while unloading fresh fruit together, Emily said, "Mom, I never imagined I could feel peace here. I used to see this place as a prison. Now, I see it as freedom." I looked at her, deeply moved, because before, you only saw the burden. Now, you see the value. She smiled and kept working. That simple gesture said more than any promise. She was no longer the arrogant daughter who sold the store. She was a new woman shaped by pain, reflection, and a second chance. The neighbors began calling the space the house for everyone. It didn't matter whether it was a grocery, a cafe, or a community center. To them, it was a place where they felt seen. We organized donation drives. Families in need came for food without shame. Some offered to work in return, and Emily always accepted, saying, "No one should leave here feeling like they received charity. Everyone here has value." It was the same daughter who once believed value only came from money. Now, she was the one teaching dignity. At night, she often sat alone at the counter after closing. The bell quiet, the lights dimmed, and I looked around, thinking of everything we had endured, from betrayal to injustice, from humiliation to catharsis. It was as if we had walked through a long winter finally arriving at spring. And in silence, I thanked Robert. He had foreseen it all, not only the risks, but also the redemption. And now, his legacy was fulfilled. With time, the new routine became steady. There was no more room for arrogance, no more secrets. The reborn store had become a symbol of truth and justice. One afternoon, as I was closing the register, Emily came over holding a small picture frame. It was a photo of Robert, smiling in front of his bus. "Mom," she said softly, "I think this belongs here in the heart of the store." Tears filled my eyes as she placed it above the counter. Robert was back, in spirit, in the place where it all began. That same day, an elderly woman walked in with a cane. She looked around, took a deep breath, and said, "It's been so long since I felt this welcome. This feels like home." Emily rushed to help her, offering a chair, a glass of water, and I stood in silence, my chest overflowing. My daughter had become the woman I had always hoped she'd be. It wasn't the money, the documents, or the hidden fortune that changed her. It was the fall, it was the pain, and above all it was the chance to begin again. That night, we locked the door together. The bell rang one last time before resting. We walked home arm in arm, unhurried. "Mom," Emily said, looking at the stars, "I can't change what I did, but I can change what I do from here on. And that's what matters," I replied. She smiled, and in that smile, I no longer saw the daughter who betrayed me. I saw the woman who had finally found her dignity. I lay down that night with a light heart. I thought of everything I had lived through: betrayal, humiliation, anger, revelation, catharsis, and I understood life always finds a way to balance the scales. The future of the store wasn't about selling bread or rice. It was about turning pain into hope, selfishness into solidarity, arrogance into reflection. And from somewhere, I felt Robert whisper, "You did it, Maggie. You guided our daughter to the value that always mattered most." I closed my eyes and smiled, because I knew the future wasn't just safe, it was flourishing. And you, if you were in my place, would you have forgiven, or would you have let the pain speak louder? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. And if you felt something in my story, don't forget to subscribe, so you won't miss what comes next.